Before you step into this story, let me warn you. This isn't a tale about betrayal for sympathy. It's a story about clarity, quiet revenge, and a woman who learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can give someone is silence. If you've ever been the overlooked one, the underestimated one, the one pushed to the side while others were praised, if you've ever had to clap for people who never clapped for you, if you've ever felt like the background character in your own life, then this story is going to feel personal, because it's not about getting even. It's about getting free. A family tried to erase her, tried to hand her a scripted ending, tried to make her small, quiet, invisible. But what they didn't know was this. Quiet people don't break. They calculate. They grow. They rise. And when the time comes, they write their own ending. So take a breath, settle in, and read until the very last line. Because what begins with silence ends with power. This envelope didn't just interrupt my life. It reinvented it. My mother slid it across the velvet table runner, her emerald ring catching the overhead lights like she was presenting a prize instead of a sentence. My older sister leaned forward with her phone angled just right, already posing, already performing, already pretending this dinner was something worth remembering. The whole restaurant paused. Even the jazz trio in the corner stumbled over a note. Inside that envelope wasn't love or congratulations or even acknowledgement. It was a severance notice. A formal, typed declaration that my family, all three of them, were releasing me from their lives. My graduation gift. I folded it once. Twice. Then I stood up. No outburst. No tears. Just quiet. The heavy kind. The kind that makes people nervous. They thought they were giving me an ending. They didn't realize they were starting their own. Growing up in our house meant one thing. Everything came with a scorecard. My father, Dr. Franklin Dorsey, saw affection as something you earned with numbers, results, statistics, measurable impact. My mother, Vivian, treated love like a spotlight, something she'd shine only if the room was watching. My sister, Selah, mastered both. She lived in a world where applause arrived before effort. She floated through life like everything had been pre-approved. At every charity gala or art auction, the introductions never changed. Selah is an executive strategist in Boston. Mom would beam, gripping her shoulder proudly. Then came the shift, tone dropping, smile tightening. And this is Amira, she'd say, gesturing to me as if I were an unfinished assignment. She's still in school. That pause, that famous pause, it weighed more than any insult. Strangers would glance at me, offer that polite smile, the kind people give when they're not sure what to do with something fragile, and then immediately drift back to the champagne trays. I learned to slip into silence, fold myself into the edges of rooms, and become the background noise in my own home. Our dining room always carried the same smell, lemon polish, old money, and pressure. The chandelier scattered light across the long glass table, fractured into a dozen tiny reflections that never landed where they belonged. While my father talked about investment portfolios and global indexes, and my mother rehearsed her perfectly scripted small talk, Selah sparkled. She knew when to laugh softly, when to tilt her head, when to lean in, as if absorbing wisdom. I studied her movements like data points, precision, timing, effortless alignment. I, on the other hand, worked closing shifts at a late-night cafe near campus. The espresso machine hissed louder than any conversation at home, and for once, the noise made sense to me. People didn't care who I was. They cared if their latte had the right number of pumps. I preferred that world, predictable, measurable, honest. One Sunday evening, after a double shift, I walked in to find Selah perched at the kitchen island, glossy laptop open, while my father poured wine into crystal glasses. "We were just discussing you," he said without looking up, swirling his glass like he was evaluating its worth. Selah didn't lift her eyes from the screen. "I just think she's wasting her brain behind a counter," she said. "But maybe it builds character." Her tone floated effortlessly, but the sting rooted deep. "I'm covering my own tuition," I finally said. My father shrugged. "Tuition doesn't create legacy, Amira." Outcomes do. I wanted to scream that I understood outcomes better than anyone in that house. But his gaze had already drifted back to Selah, the center of their world. After that night, I stopped inserting myself. I simply watched, quiet, steady, taking mental notes in the only language I trusted: observation. And yet sometimes, just sometimes, I allowed myself to believe things could shift. Like the day I earned a National Urban Innovation Scholarship. I emailed them the announcement, attached my feature article, waited for something more than silence. 6 hours later, my mother responded, "Wonderful news, sweetheart. We have a banquet tonight. I'll post about it tomorrow." She never posted. That was the day I understood the truth. In my family, attention was a form of currency. I was the unpaid intern in their empire. I remember the sound of their champagne glasses clinking that night. Smiling, toasting, celebrating nothing connected to me. It was the sound of my invisibility, and it taught me my place. Somewhere between silence and evidence. 2 days before graduation, a message popped up in the family group chat. A single link. No greeting. No warmth. Just pre-graduation dinner for Amira. Dress accordingly. A reservation at La Marie Bleu, my mother's favorite French fusion spot. The same place she reserved for every milestone that wasn't attached to my name. I clicked the link. The guest list read, Dorsey family, Franklin, Vivian, Selah. My name wasn't there. Not forgotten. Not overlooked. Erased. An hour later, Selah texted privately. Don't take it personally. It's just formatting. Formatting. That was how she saw me. A line item. A variable. Something that could be deleted without breaking the formula. That night, I sat at my desk in my small midtown apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds like jittery static. My inbox pinged with unread messages, investors asking to connect, classmates sending congratulations, professors sharing opportunities, achievements, milestones, digital applause. But none of it carried weight when the people who raised you still measured your worth in silence. I scrolled through old family photos, holiday dinners, charity events, vacations to places I barely remembered. My mother always stood in the middle, posture perfect. My father beside her, smiling like a man rehearsing a part. Selah glowing on one side, already camera ready at 12. And me, always at the edge of the frame. Half lit, half present, half acknowledged. For the first time, I looked at those photos without hope. This wasn't new. It was simply the first time I stopped pretending it wasn't happening. The next morning, I received an email from the university confirming my speaking slot at commencement. My mentor, Professor Helena Ruiz, had nominated me for the Emerging Innovator Award in Systems Design. She ended her message with, "This moment belongs to you. Stand in it quietly." Quietly. Most people think silence means weakness. But she said it like it was a strategy, a strength, a choice. The sunlight cut across my desk in clean geometric stripes, landing on neatly stacked documents. My notebook, my coffee mug, my laptop, all aligned perfectly. My life wasn't chaotic. It was organized, just not organized by them anymore. I smiled, a small, certain smile, the kind you wear when the math finally balances itself. The night before the dinner, a summer storm pressed against the windows, turning the city into a watercolor of blurred lights. Inside, my apartment was calm, precise, symmetrical. Everything in its place. I brewed another pot of chai-spiced coffee and let the warmth settle into my bones. My fingertips tapped the keyboard rhythmically as I filed new documents, project updates, investor responses, spreadsheets that told the story of a future I built myself. Months ago, I stopped explaining myself to my family. Explaining was for people who needed permission to exist. Evidence was for people building something permanent. So I built evidence. Digital copies of heavy checkmark, every scholarship heavy checkmark, every award heavy checkmark, every published article heavy checkmark, every financial record heavy checkmark, every prototype note heavy checkmark, every line of code. And most important, every step of the tech platform I had quietly created with my team. What started as a class assignment had evolved into FlowStrive, a routing optimization system for community-based delivery services, designed for the underserved neighborhoods mainstream tech ignored. I wrote the core algorithm. My colleague, Zuri Hall, built the user dashboard. Our analyst, Jordan Tate, tested every scenario. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it worked. The breakthrough had come at 4 a.m., when I ran a simulation that reduced fuel usage by 14% for small carriers. 14%. Not huge in corporate boardrooms, but transformational for small, struggling businesses. Proof. Mathematical, unarguable proof. When our cohort startup showcase arrived, FlowStrive wasn't just ready, it was inevitable. Before I went on stage, Professor Ruiz stopped me. "You don't have to perform," she whispered. "Just show them the truth." I did. And the room erupted. Not performative applause, but real acknowledgement. People finally saw me. Standing at the edge of that stage, I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Devin Rowe, the CEO of Urban Pulse Transit Technologies, watched with a measured expression, the kind of look business leaders give when they've already made a decision. Afterward, he approached me. "You built something that respects people who never get considered in the data," he said. "That matters." We met again 2 days later, and again the week after. The third meeting, he slid a sleek folder toward me. Inside was a formal acquisition offer. $5.8 million plus a Director of Systems Impact position after graduation. I didn't sign immediately. I read every line, every subclause, every condition. I wasn't asking for a seat at someone else's table. I was negotiating ownership of my future. When I finally signed, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like equilibrium, balance restored. That was when I began my evidence archive. Encrypted, time-stamped, irrefutable. The night the final transfer confirmation arrived, I printed the letter. The sound of the page sliding out of the printer sounded cleaner than applause. That was the moment I reopened the family chat for the first time in months. At the top was a new photo my mother had sent, Selah at another corporate event, smiling beneath the banner. "So proud of our star," the caption read. I typed a simple reply. "Dinner tomorrow confirmed. I'll be there." Then I closed the chat and cleaned my apartment with the precision of someone preparing for a new chapter. Everything aligned, everything intentional, everything documented. Midnight settled softly over the city, the storm easing into a mist that streaked across my apartment windows like watercolor. I closed my laptop and let the quiet sink in. My offer letter lay on the desk, anchored beneath a silver clip. Beside it sat something older, a faded birthday card my mother had given me when I was 8. To my little visionary, it read. I slid the acquisition documents beneath that card, the new reality layered under the old lie. The ink was fresh, the paper heavy, evidence that life could evolve without permission. I moved through my apartment one last time, straightening the notebooks, aligning the pens, wiping down the counter. Ritual before revelation. Tomorrow wouldn't be a dinner. It would be a timestamp. I woke before sunrise. The first light cut across the room in thin gold lines, catching the edge of the contract packet like it was something sacred. I dressed with intention. Not for them. Not for approval, but for record-keeping. A structured charcoal blazer, hair slicked back, minimal makeup. Clean. Sharp. Unapologetic. Not a daughter. Not a shadow. A woman walking into her own story. Before leaving, I placed my coffee mug exactly 1 inch from the edge of the desk. Habit. Precision. Control. I locked the door behind me. The streets of Harbor City, Illinois, still smelled like last night's rain. Puddles stretched thin across the asphalt, reflecting the early blue sky like pieces of broken glass. A passing bus rolled by, and for a moment, my reflection appeared in the window, steady, composed, unfamiliar in the best way. Near La Marie Blue, I paused outside the glass doors, watching the warm lights flicker inside. I saw the outline of my mother adjusting her shawl, Selah reviewing her camera angles, my father checking his watch as if he had an audience waiting. They were preparing a performance. But this time, I wasn't playing a supporting role. The hostess greeted me with a polished smile. Reservation name? Dorsey, I said. She scanned the list, frowned slightly when she didn't see my name, then quickly masked it with hospitality. They're already seated, she said. Of course they were. I followed her through the restaurant. The air smelled of rosemary, truffle, and curated indifference. My family sat tucked beneath a soft chandelier glow, each of them wearing their version of a camera-ready face. My mother waved like we were old friends reconnecting. Selah angled her phone so discreetly even the hostess couldn't tell she was recording. They had rehearsed this. Amira, sweetheart, my mother said, her voice dripping in artificial warmth. We planned something special for you. A server stepped forward and placed a clean white envelope in front of me, centered perfectly between my utensils. My father cleared his throat. It's time we all move forward, he said, straightening his tie. My mother nodded, smiling wider. It's from all of us. Selah's camera caught every angle. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a formal detachment letter, typed, notarized, and signed by all three of them. They were disowning me. In writing. At a restaurant. On camera. My graduation present. The table went still. The trio's music faltered into an uncomfortable pause. They waited for the scene. A breakdown. A plea. A collapse. Instead, I folded the letter once. Twice. Then I set it calmly beside my water glass. Thank you, I said. Three faces shifted at once. My sister blinked. You're thanking us? I met her eyes without trembling. Yes. Finally, something honest. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hand froze mid-reach for her wine. Selah's phone lowered an inch, confusion creasing her perfect expression. Before any of them could recover, I reached into my bag and placed a sleek gray folder on the table. The same color as the folder Devin had handed me weeks earlier. I slid it toward them. Quietly. Precisely. Intentionally. Selah leaned closer, curiosity burning through her composure. Inside the folder was the announcement from Urban Pulse Transit Technologies, the acquisition, the terms, my new title. Director of Systems Impact. FlowStrive Integration Lead. My name in bold. My mother blinked, reading the print twice. My father leaned forward, scanning the numbers, his face paling in real time. You sold it, he whispered. No, I said. I built it. Then I sold it. Selah's voice cracked. This is yours? All I said was, yes. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Even the trio in the corner shifted to a slower, somber melody, as if unknowingly scoring the moment their illusion collapsed. My mother tried to pull her dignity back up around her shoulders. We didn't know, she said quietly. I know, I replied. It was the first time I'd ever seen her without a script. My father lifted his wine glass, but his hand trembled enough for the stem to clink softly against his ring. Selah stared at the acquisition letter like it was written in a language she'd never seen. I stood. You can keep the letter, I said, sliding their disownment papers back to the center of the table. I already have mine. Their faces froze, stunned, exposed, undone. I walked away without looking back. Behind me, I heard Selah whisper something that sounded like a plea, or maybe a warning, but I kept walking. Their silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was peace. Outside the restaurant, the air was colder than I expected, crisp, almost cleansing. It smelled like wet pavement and freedom, the kind you don't realize you've been craving until it hits you all at once. La Marie Blue's golden lights glowed behind me, soft and distant, like a place I used to visit in a dream. For the first time in years, I didn't feel tethered to that world, or the people sitting inside it. My phone buzzed with alerts, notifications from business journals, tech blogs, local papers. Word about the FlowStrive acquisition was spreading faster than the rainwater running along the curb. Every ping was proof. Every headline was closure. Every timestamp was my independence being archived. The envelope they'd given me felt lighter now. Like paper, not power. I walked without rush, letting my heels sink with the hum of traffic. Each step peeled away the memories, every belittling comment, every dismissive glance, every forced smile, Every moment they treated me like a placeholder instead of a person. By the time I reached my apartment building, the sky had stretched into early dawn. Soft light filtered between the high rises, bleeding gently into the edges of a city. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. Silence greeted me, not the suffocating kind I'd grown up with, but the clean, steady kind I chose. I placed the envelope they'd handed me on the counter, right next to my newly framed degree. Their letter looked oddly small beside my accomplishments. 2 documents. 2 stories. 2 versions of my name. One they erased. One they could never touch. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee, slow and intentional. The mug clicked softly against the wood grain of my table. That sound, steady, controlled, felt like the heartbeat of a life I built myself. I didn't bother rereading their letter. I didn't need to. It had already served its purpose, marking the precise moment I stopped asking for a place in their world. I picked it up anyway, folded it neatly, and tucked it behind the glass of my degree frame, not hidden, just categorized. Labeled. Organized. Evidence, not emotion. Proof of what had been. Reminder of what changed. My phone vibrated once, then twice. A text from Selah. We didn't mean it like that. Can we talk? The typing bubbles flickered, disappeared, flickered again. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I turned the phone face down. Not every message needs a reply. Some are meant to echo, to fade, to show what silence really sounds like when it's finally yours. Outside, the city awakened. Buses rumbling, dogs barking, joggers pounding the pavement. A new day beginning like any other, but I felt different. Rewired. Reset. Reclaimed. I pushed the window open. Morning air drifted in, cool, sharp with the smell of early traffic and metal. Somewhere below, a train screeched along its tracks, raw and honest. I caught my reflection in the glass. A woman no longer waiting for approval. No longer sitting in shadows. No longer small. A woman who walked away from the table without losing anything. A woman who built her own. I sat at my desk, watching the warm light stretch itself across the room. For the first time, silence didn't feel like a void. It felt like ownership. Peace wasn't loud. Peace wasn't dramatic. Peace was structured breath in a quiet room. The kind you choose. The kind you protect. The kind you earn. They had written me out of their version of the story, but I had already drafted the new one. Their chapter ended with a signature. Mine began with one. Morning settled into my apartment with a calm I hadn't felt in years. Warm light filtered in through the blinds, stretching across the floor like a soft invitation into a life finally my own. I moved through the space slowly, deliberately, each step grounding me in the new reality I had created. Not inherited, not borrowed, not begged for. Mine. I picked up the envelope one last time, the one they'd handed me with rehearsed smiles and cameras rolling. Its edges felt less sharp now. Its weight felt insignificant. A relic of who they once had the power to be. I folded it cleanly and slid it behind my framed degree, flattened between achievements, tucked away in its proper place. Not honored, not cherished. Categorized. Then I exhaled, and something inside me unlocked. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Selah. Please, Amira. Let's talk. It wasn't supposed to go that way. The dots bubbled, disappeared, returned. A cycle of hesitation. I didn't answer. Not out of bitterness. Not out of revenge. But because silence had become my boundary. My sanctuary. My strategy. Some conversations don't rebuild bridges. They reopen wounds. And I wasn't bleeding anymore. The city outside hummed with Monday energy, delivery vans rumbling down the street, commuters rushing toward train stations, horns echoing off tall buildings. Life didn't pause to acknowledge loss or clarity. It simply continued. And so did I. I opened the window wider. Cool air swept in, brushing over my face, carrying the faint scent of rain and possibility. When I caught my reflection in the glass, I saw a woman I finally recognized. A woman who had stopped apologizing for taking up space. A woman who learned that being overlooked wasn't a prophecy, just a perspective. A woman who built something undeniable out of the silence, meant to diminish her. A woman who didn't need them to choose her. She had already chosen herself. I poured another cup of coffee and sat at my desk, my sanctuary of order and alignment. FlowStrive documents glowed on the screen. New messages from Urban Pulse executives awaited my reply. Investors had begun sending introductions. The world was already shifting. I smiled. Not the polite, practiced smile my mother once trained into me, but a real one. Small, steady, certain. I lifted my coffee mug, feeling the soft warmth against my palms, and held it for a moment before taking a slow sip. This right here was the calm after the storm. Not revenge. Not triumph. Not fury. Just clarity. The kind that stays. People expect stories like mine to end with forgiveness, dramatic reunions, or emotional reconciliations. But the truth is simpler, quieter. Some chapters close without apologies. Some families fracture without repair. Some endings don't need loud closure. Just understanding. And I understood now, finally, that being written out of their story wasn't a punishment. It was permission. Permission to begin my own story without their edit notes, their conditions, their limitations. Permission to exist outside their script. Permission to grow without their shadows. Permission to be whole. I placed my mug down gently, watching the steam curl upward like a quiet benediction. For the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like exile. It felt like home. Some stories end with applause. Some end with tears. But this one ends with something stronger, clarity. Because sometimes the people who raised you teach you everything except how to survive without them until the moment you're forced to. And in that moment, you learn the truth. Small blue diamond silence is not weakness. Small blue diamond distance is not disrespect. Small blue diamond walking away is not failure. It's growth. It's reclamation. It's choosing your peace over someone else's performance. They erased her name. They dismissed her efforts. They tried to hand her an ending, but all they did was free her to begin. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed out, this story is your reminder. Your value is not determined by the people who refuse to see it. Your silence can be your strategy, and your success will always be your reply. If this story hit home, drop a black heart in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, city and country. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that walking away is sometimes the real win. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful revenge stories, more twists, and more endings that feel like justice. Stay tuned, because the quiet ones, we write the loudest stories.